In this lecture, we will explore the development of the genre of Greek tragedy, and we'll do so by first noting that Greek tragedy reached its peak as an art form in the 5th century BCE. So that's the years 500 BCE to 400 BCE. And this is a uniquely Athenian literary art form, I should point out. Although it's often called Greek drama or Greek tragedy, it is more specifically related to the city-state of Athens. And that's because tragedies were written and performed as part of a religious festival celebrating the god Dionysus. It was one of the great festivals of Athens, the city Dionysia, where over a course of 3 days, three Greek playwrights would perform or have performed their tragedies, and this was a big contest to see who would emerge as the best, and they would be given an award. But it is interesting to note that tragedy and the idea of performance is associated with the god Dionysus. Remember, Dionysus being the god of fertility and pleasure, irrationality, ecstasy, but also of transformation. And of course, in any kind of public performance, whether it be a play or nowadays with movies and TV, people are transforming themselves into different characters. So that is perhaps a direct linkage with why tragedy emerges out of a series of festivals honoring the god Dionysus. Now, the nature of tragedies themselves was very serious, and we do see that tragedies would often explore human passions that have gotten out of control, that threaten the order and stability of a society. And there also was a practical purpose to performing these plays, because you would get, at any given performance, in the Great Theater, in the shadow of the Acropolis in Athens, you could get upwards of 17,000 people seated to watch these performances. And of course, the actors all wore masks, and inside the mask was a little kind of megaphone that would project the actor's voice. And the masks were there to heighten facial expressions. So even if you were an audience member up there in the cheap seats, you could follow the action and gauge the tone of what was going on. And the practical purpose of having so many citizens, so many Athenian citizens, witness these tragedies was to explore these very serious issues, again, in many ways, destabilizing issues of incest, matricide, murder, all these things, ambition that had gotten out of control. And if you were an audience member viewing this, in a safe place, okay, you're not directly in the action, you're not have to worry about being killed, or nobody's really being killed, it's all play acting. You get a psychological linkage with the action, and through that psychological linkage, the idea was you would purge these emotions that you may have inside yourself. And this is what Aristotle called catharsis, this cleansing that actually occurs amongst the audience members as they witness, as they watch the action taking place on stage. And Aristotle thought this was a very useful process, because if you are cleansing your citizen body of these urges, then you make your city-state, your polis, a better place. But also, we should note, and I'm going to keep coming back to this, that these tragedies also tended to address contemporary issues that were very important, that were being hotly debated within the polis itself. Remember, by the 5th century BCE, Athens had become a democracy with a very active citizen body. So again, by having these social issues embedded within the context of your particular tragedy that has a mythical framework, you kill two birds with one stone. You entertain an audience, you provide a catharsis, and you also, again, keep the relevant issue very much in the public's mind. Now, the big three, the authors that I want you to be familiar with, are Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. And I've listed them in the order in which they lived, although there was some overlap, certainly. But these are the big three. They used myth as a platform to look at other issues. And we'll begin with the Theban myths, and it is to Sophocles who we'll turn to, because Sophocles is known for writing three tragedies, all associated with the city-state of Thebes. And we will single out for further analysis the greatest of these three plays, indeed the greatest of the tragedies according to Aristotle, and that is Oedipus Rex, Oedipus the King. And before we get into the play itself, we have to be aware that just as in epic with the concept of in medias res, the authors anticipated that the audience would have some significant background knowledge of the myths associated with their particular tragedies. So we're going to get into first the background myths, because there will be quite a bit of dramatic irony associated with this tragedy, just as in all tragedies. And of course, the story, the background story of Oedipus Rex, has to do with one of the early kings of Thebes. Thebes was founded by a guy named Cadmus, who has a whole host of myths associated with him. But as we move down a few generations to his great-grandson, Laos, and Laos is going to be the king of Thebes right before the action of the play opens up. And Laos is a bit of a hothead, a bit of a troublemaker, but ultimately he will marry a young noble bride named Jocasta. So, Laos and Jocasta will be the couple here that we're focusing on. And Laos goes to Delphi to find out some information about his immediate future and also his own family life, and he finds out from the oracle that he will father a son who is going to kill him and marry Jocasta. So of course by now you guys know that this is the prophesized Oedipus, the young man who will do exactly that. Well, Laius is initially alarmed by this, but after a night of partying, he decides to go to bed with his wife, have sex with her, and they will then conceive young Oedipus. So Jocasta will give birth to young Oedipus, and the young child, though, will be exposed, will be left out on the side of a mountain. This was an acceptable practice back in the ancient world to get rid of unwanted children, and if you don't want the blood guilt directly on you, you simply leave them out in a natural setting and let the elements take care of the dirty business. So Laius again tries to thwart fate by leaving the newborn child on the top of Mount Kithaeron, and the location here is important. Kithaeron, located here, is just outside of the Thebes, I guess what you call the city limits, but it's not all that far away from the city-state of Corinth. And Laius does not actually leave the child out there. He sends a slave to do the dirty work, and so the slave does, but the child will be saved. Saved by a shepherd from Corinth who was out grazing his flocks near Mount Kithaeron, sees the young infant and picks him up and brings him back home to Corinth, where he presents the king and queen with the newborn child. Now, King Polybus and Queen Merope don't have any male heirs of their own, so they decide that they will adopt this young child, and they will call him Oedipus. Oedipus means swollen foot in Greek, and this has to do with, evidently, Laios, to make doubly sure that the young infant won't survive the exposure, has pierced both of the infant's ankles. And this, of course, has led to some swelling, perhaps some infection. But this is where Oedipus will get his name from, because of this physical infirmity that he has when he is first presented to his adoptive parents. Now, Polybus and Merope do not tell Oedipus anything about how he came to be their son. So as far as young Oedipus is concerned, they are his natural parents. They are the only parents he has known. He knows nothing at all about Laios and Jocasta. Now, I'm going to fast track this a little bit. When Oedipus is old enough, he decides to go to Delphi. He is concerned about his own identity. He wants to know who he is. So he asks the oracle there, and the oracle never gives him a straight answer. Instead, tells Oedipus that Oedipus, you are going to kill your father and marry your mother. This is the same prophecy, of course, that Laius had heard that triggered this whole thing. And Oedipus is determined not to go back to Corinth because, as far as he knows, Polybus and Merope are his parents, and he doesn't want to do them any harm. So, on the return journey to Delphi, from Delphi, he does not go back to Corinth. Instead, he heads into Boeotia towards the city of Thebes. And this is where we see the confrontation occur between Oedipus and his real father, Laius. Laios was on his way to Delphi to ask the oracle what to do about a monster that was plaguing Thebes at the time, this monster called the Sphinx. And the Sphinx would sit outside the city and would ask travelers and passersby a riddle. What walks on four legs in the morning, two in the afternoon, and three in the evening? And when the travelers or citizens of Thebes trying to get out of their city failed to answer this riddle, and nobody could answer it, the Sphinx would consume them, would eat them. So this is a real problem, and Thebes is suffering as a consequence. So as king, Laos decides, I've got to go find out how to solve this problem. So he goes to Delphi. Well, when he's headed to Delphi and Oedipus is headed back from Delphi, they meet at a crossroads. And there is a confrontation. According to many of the sources, it was over who had the right of way. And neither one would budge. And Oedipus will kill Laos and will kill several of the retainers that Laos had with him. There is one of the retainers will remain alive to report back to Thebes that some maniac has just killed our king and a bunch of other guys. And here you see in this painting Oedipus holding the cane that he probably used to walk with. Remember, he had his ankles pierced as a child. May have caused some crippling injury, lifelong infirmity. And Oedipus is wailing away, it looks like on King Laos here. And now I just want to pause a moment to connect Oedipus with this hero formula that you and I have been tracking since the Perseus lecture. And we see in the Oedipus character all the components of a hero. And I'm talking now about a difficult birth scenario and the miraculous survival of the infant, and now we're seeing kind of heroic actions performed while out on the road. And of course, the heroic actions have to do with Oedipus not just beating to death an old man, Laos, but also taking on and killing a bunch of other younger, more fit retainers of Laos. And so we see now that Oedipus is moving in the direction of traditional Greek heroes, and of course he'll also have to deal with some sort of monster, and this he does when he does find his way to Thebes, and he is confronted by the Sphinx. And the Sphinx, of course, asks Oedipus the riddle, and Oedipus has the answer. What walks on four legs, and then two legs, and then three legs? It is man. Man walks on four legs when he's a baby. He crawls two legs when he's an adult. And then when he's an infirm old person, he will walk with the aid of a cane. So you have the three legs there. So Oedipus correctly answers the riddle of the Sphinx, and the Sphinx, in a kind of a fit of hysterics, jumps off the platform where she has lodged herself and kills herself. And so now Thebes is free from this devious influence, this malign influence. And the best part, as far as Oedipus is concerned, is he now has a new home, because the deal that the people of Thebes, the governing council, has come up with is that whoever takes care of the Sphinx will become king of Thebes, because by this point, that one surviving retainer of Laos has made his way back to the city and has told everybody that the king is dead. So they now need a new king, and whoever takes care of the Sphinx will become that king, and he will get to marry the widowed queen Jocasta. So here we have the fulfillment of the prophecy. We have Oedipus killing his father unwittingly, marrying his mother unwittingly, and the prophecy is fulfilled. And so, with all the background knowledge out of the way, we can now begin to explore the play itself. And after many years, a plague of infertility begins to torment the city. Crops will not grow, animals cannot reproduce, so there's a very real risk of famine. And Oedipus will send his brother-in-law, Creon, to Delphi to find out what's going on and how best to solve the crisis. And when Creon returns with the Delphic oracle's prophecy, it reads something like, the reason that this plague is hurting the city is because the killer of King Laos has never been brought to justice and actually lives amongst the people. And so Oedipus, as king, is determined to root out the cause of this evil, and will find the perpetrator and bring him to justice. And he actually lays down a curse on whoever killed Laos, not knowing, of course, that he's cursing himself. So Oedipus needs to kind of narrow the suspect list a little bit, so he decides to enlist the aid of the most famous prophet, I think, in all of Greek mythology, and that is the blind prophet Tiresias of Thebes. Now, Tiresias has a very interesting backstory. Prior to possessing any special characteristics, Tiresias was just a young guy out for a walk one day, and he saw on the ground two snakes writhing around and mating. And he decided to step on the snakes, and this was a bad move. Upon stepping on the snakes, he is immediately transformed into a woman. And he lives as a woman for several years, and he actually becomes a prostitute and achieves quite a reputation. And then one day, walking around the town as a prostitute, she, I should say, sees two snakes writhing around on the ground again. And the accounts differ. In one account, it's she steps on the snakes. In another, the snakes are avoided. But the result is that Tiresias is turned back into a man. And having lived as both a woman and as a man, Tiresias is uniquely qualified to satisfy a debate that is ongoing between Hera and Zeus over who enjoys sexual intercourse more, women or men. And Zeus suggests that they consult Tiresias, who has had sexual experience from the male perspective and the female perspective, and Tiresias is uniquely suited to settle this question. And Tiresias does settle the question according to a late summary of the myth. Tiresias, when asked, responds, "If the pleasure of love be divided in 10, 9 go to women and 1 to men." So he's saying, of course, that women enjoy sex a lot more than men do, and Hera is very angry at losing the debate, so she blinds Tiresias. Now Zeus, who is very happy that Tiresias settled in his favor, gives Tiresias the gift of prophecy. And from that moment on, Tiresias is renowned as a prophet. And of course, other heroes will have to consult him. Odysseus in Homer's Odyssey has to go to the underworld to consult with Tiresias after the prophet has died, but he still retains a formidable reputation. So anyway, Oedipus wants to make use of Tiresias's gifts and asks Tiresias to help him out and find out who the perpetrator is. Now, there is some back and forth between Oedipus and Tiresias, and Tiresias is kind of skirting the question. Now, Tiresias does know that Oedipus is the source of the crisis. Oedipus is the killer of King Laos, but he does not want to come out and directly say it. And Oedipus goes from patiently listening to losing his patience, and begins to more or less insult Tiresias and his ability to tell prophecy. And Tiresias, in a fit of anger, basically bluntly tells Oedipus, "You are the land's pollution." And Oedipus does not want to hear this. He does not want to recognize that he, in any way, shape, or form, could be responsible for any of this bad stuff. And it's at that moment, and here now I'm relying upon Sophocles' play Oedipus Rex. It's at this moment that a messenger from Corinth arrives into Thebes and announces that King Polybus has died. And Oedipus, again, thinking he's the natural-born son of Polybus, rejoices because his father, as far as he knows, has died, and Oedipus has not killed him. So the prophecy is false. And but that joy and relief only lasts for a moment, because it just so happens that this messenger from Corinth is also the same shepherd who saved young Oedipus as a boy and brought him to the household of Polybus and Merope. And the messenger, the Corinthian messenger slash shepherd, takes the opportunity to tell Oedipus all about the true circumstances of his birth. And it is then that Oedipus begins to realize that something is wrong here. And Jocasta, his wife, has recognized earlier than Oedipus, that indeed her husband is indeed her son. And so she goes off stage. Again, we might imagine this all being acted out on stage. Jocasta leaves and hangs herself. And Oedipus, as the recognition gradually dawns on him that if Polybus wasn't my father, then perhaps Laos was, and I've killed him, and I've married my mother, and oh my goodness. And of course, Oedipus will discover the hanging body of Jocasta. She has committed suicide by hanging. He will take the pins that she has used to secure her garments, and he pokes out his own eyes. He blinds himself. In a way symbolic of the fact that he had gone through much of his life truly blind to the circumstances of his own origins. Now we get into what issue could Sophocles be inserting into the mythic framework that would have some relevance to an audience, a member watching this tragedy unfold. And it's interesting to note that when Sophocles, about midway through his life, a rather prominent school of education developed in Athens called Sophism. And this was a pedagogical movement. It was taught by itinerant wandering teachers who would be hired as private tutors for the sons of the very wealthy and anybody that could afford them. And they taught this method called Sophism, which basically taught these boys rhetoric, public speaking, and debate skills. And it did so by teaching the young boys how to argue both sides of an issue equally effectively and equally passionately. And this was problematic for many Athenians, because if somebody is equally well versed in arguing side A or side B of any issue, how can you tell when they're telling the truth? I mean, these sophists, these teachers, could be teaching these young people how to just lie more effectively. And that could undermine the fabric of society in general. So the Sophists also, there were a lot of issues associated with them, as there is with any movement that was considered so radical. Sophists were also steeped in what they considered rational behavior, and they seemed to give short shrift to the whole idea that the gods were responsible for so much activity in human existence. And so the Sophists themselves were very, very controversial. And if we were to take a look at Sophocles writing at the high point of this particular controversial educational movement, we can see Oedipus, we can read Oedipus, the character of Oedipus, as kind of this paradigm of a rationalist guy. He thinks he's got everything all figured out. He's figured out the riddle of the Sphinx. He's become a king of a city. He think he's got all the answers, and he has done this by his own skills, his own intellect. And then he finds out that so much of what he thought was true is not true. And this could be Sophocles saying something along the lines of, human beings aren't the be all end all. There are other unfathomable aspects of existence. Intellect will only take you so far, and if you think it can take you farther, perhaps you are exhibiting that type of dangerous pride, that hubris, that can only bring trouble to a protagonist. In this case, of course, Oedipus. So this is what I mean by poking attention at a particular issue that is being seen as controversial as you write this mythical account of, in this case, of Oedipus and the city of Thebes.